Hello, and welcome back to a new episode of the Repaint Reality Manifestation Podcast. We have a new addition to the world and to everything that I'm about to be doing. And he is in a wake window right now. So, because it just had a timeout just right, right? You set everything up while he's sleeping, and then he's like awake the moment that you start this thing. But we've got Jasper here. And so you'll probably hear him throughout this because he's here doing his thing, being a small guy. But this is where we have a really cool episode talking about being the calm in chaos. And the reason for that is because I wanted to share some of the birth story, the labor story, and something that kept being mentioned the entire time was that there was a lot of calm. And it was kind of chaotic, to be honest. Everything was the absolute unexpected. And I'm really big, if you guys remember. Let's see, I'll get this guy here. Get, there we go. And I'm big on the circle of influence. What is it that we actually are capable of influencing and changing and being in control of? And so there was a lot that started to become out of my control whenever I went into labor. And I didn't plan on going into labor that night. I did not know this, but I had preeclampsia. So that was interesting. I was dealing with high blood pressure, which can be kind of sketchy at times. And so I had already been monitoring my blood pressure. I had gone into the hospital already where they had given me new medicine from labor delivery for managing my blood pressure. They were having me come back in and just do these scans to make sure everything was good and all right. And eventually, one night, I checked it and it was just getting really high again, even with the medicine that I was on. And so I went in to just double check that the cuff that I had at home was accurate, that it was high. And that's when the doctor came up to me and he was just like, well, third time's a charm. You're here again. I didn't tell you this, but had you came in and everything was fine on Tuesday, we were going to just have you be induced on Friday. And I was like, oh, thanks for informing me. But that's where he told me that night they were going to start induction. They said, we're going to start at midnight. And I've never, it's my first child. I've never done this before. And so at that point, I was like, okay, we are going to start this process. I guess it's go time because you don't know when it's go time. I don't even prep a bag. Like people talk about prepping this bag of all these things to make sure you're ready for when you go into labor. And I literally in our bag brought his take home outfit and a take home outfit for me just in case. We were like, with the amount of times that we're going into this labor and delivery, we should do this just in case. But we were kind of in a rush to head out there because of how high my blood pressure was getting. And so that's all we had. That is it. Didn't even bring our chargers. Luckily, this is where we have family, and they were able to bring us chargers. And so there we went. I get into a gown. I'm getting prepped. They put me into a room. They say, okay, this is going to be your, room for the next little while. You're going to get cozy here. And I'm like, okay. They start the induction process at midnight. At this point, I'm told I can no longer eat. I can have liquids only. And I'm a foodie. You don't know how long this process is going to be. And they say that they do that just in case that you have like a C-section. That way you're not going to, like possibly throw up or anything like that in the middle of it. And that way you don't asphyxiate, which is like reasonable. But at this point, I'm thinking, I'm not going to have a C-section because I really wanted to have natural delivery. And so they go ahead, they start the process, which means the contractions start to come in. And it starts that night, and I notice that as they come in, my family starts to make comments. This is the first time that they start to really make comments between my husband and my mom that are really noting like this moment of saying like, you seem to have a lot of calm every time we still see these contractions happening on the little scanner. They're like, you don't look like someone having contractions. And this is where I want to note what I was doing at this point. Every time I felt one of those contractions, I really made it a point to kind of just visualize. And this is where I think there's a really strong importance to visualizations. I'm not saying that visualizations are like the solution to all the world's problems, but we can't control feeling like contractions happening. If once you are pregnant and you're going into labor, like it is what it is, contractions are going to be part of the process. And so I would visualize, and it helped a lot, I think, just almost being in this shallow water where it was just like waving back and forth. I was running Reiki energy the entire time that I would go through one, and just visualize this water as if it was like a glittery crystal water that would just wash like up and down and just be like working with my body, healing, soothing. And so I had that picture, and then also my husband would come up if he noticed, and then he would just kind of rub my back sometimes or just rub my shoulders. And we looked at this video at one point, and it went over just examples of working through pain, especially before going in for, labor. And what they had us do in that video was you would hold an ice cube for 15 seconds, and you're like looking at this ice cube, and it feels uncomfortable because holding ice is uncomfortable. And it was a long 15 seconds. The second time, they have you hold on to it, but they have you close your eyes and you're visualizing being somewhere like very peaceful, very comfortable. And you're holding on to it for 30 seconds that time. And even though it was 30 seconds, it didn't feel as long as the 15 seconds. And then the third time, they're having you hold on to it, visualize something, they say like a beach or something. I'm not necessarily a beach person, but just somewhere very paradise-ish. And then you're going to have your partner or your husband, like rubbing your shoulders or just giving you like hugs and just that contact. And so we tried that, and it was 60 seconds that time. And it was still even easier than the first and second time, even though it was longer to hold that ice in my palm. And so I really remembered that once it was go time, that, a visualization of some sort was going to be important. And accepting like those loving, kind hugs or caresses or touches were going to be really helpful as well. So I leaned into that. And that is probably one of the first ways that I think there was a lot of calm through what ended up becoming a 31-hour labor process. So those contractions were happening for quite a while, where I just had to breathe through it and go through it. And eventually they asked about the epidural. For the longest time, I debated if I was going to go for that or not. And because of the complications that I had been having with my hips and the amount of pain, which funny enough, there was not a single contraction I had that was as painful as my hips had been for the past several months. That was where the real pain came from. And I was terrified of what that was going to feel like paired in with birth. And so I went ahead and did it eventually on the next day. And so I'd already gone through starting labor that whole night into the next day. It was that evening. We do the epidural. And then we are going through the process. And so now I can't feel anything really. And, well, like lower. But we go through a second night of being in labor. And it's around 7 6:30 maybe a.m. The next day, we're like on day 3 now of having been in the hospital, and that's when they let me know that it's not going well. He's struggling every time they try to keep on with the inducing medicine that they were using. And they're trying to balance my blood pressure with his heart with this medicine, and that the equation's just not adding up. It's not ideal. And so at this point is when they let me know that they're going to be sending me in for a C-section. And I'm like, oh. And I won't lie, this is the part that got me, because I really wanted to feel that moment of like pushing, and just, it felt a little bit like something was being taken away. And so this is where I just let myself feel the emotions. Like once they left the room, like I looked at my husband, I started crying a bit. Like, I won't lie, like it was one of the things that I really wanted. This is where I think I remembered this. I say in this podcast a lot with manifestation, like there's things that we think that we want, but there's always like more true or larger wants, more authentic wants. And as much as I did want to be able to, push him out and to deliver in that style, what I want, my larger want, my true want, was for him to make it here in this world safely. Like, above all else, that was top of the list. And so while there was something to grieve, a process or a path that was no longer going to be taken, and I did let myself grieve it, I knew that this new route that was being taken was for the larger want. And so, and you ask in that moment, you're like, okay, what time are we doing this? And they're like, 7 a.m. is when it's scheduled for. You're like, oh my God, that's now less than half an hour away. So there's no time to really think about it or to be freaked out for too long, because I won't lie, the idea of being cut through the center was not what I wanted. It was not ideal. It freaked me out. And so I was just like, okay, we're doing this in less than half an hour. And so at that point, they start prepping me. They get a new medication to make sure, or whatever it was, to make sure that you're not going to feel your stomach being torn through the center. And they like take your bed, they just wheel you out. In the whole wheeling process, to get from the room, the labor and delivery room I was in, to the operating room, that's where I went in strong with visualization again, because, I could freak out about it. I could, and I did, like I said, when I was first told, I like looked at my husband, I cried. But like at this point, it was go time. Like, and like being messy crying was not going to help them to be able to safely deliver. Like, they have to go up in my guts. And so I got to make sure that I'm good for them to like do what they need to do. Stay calm. Like, if you ever remember my past, if I've talked about that in previous episodes, it is someone with anxiety disorder that would go into hyperventilating for like not even big things. And so at this point, the visualization I have as they're wheeling me to the OR was just almost like I was somewhere where this light was shining on me, where like I envisioned like all the tools and utensils that they're going to be using being like these crystal infused tools. It's almost like I went to a different place for a second and just asked for like all of the guides, all of the timelines, just to like allow for the wisdom to come through, allow for these processes to just be smooth, to be safe, for my body to be prepped. It was as if I connected with past timelines of myself, where I was like, anytime that I've done this, anytime that I've ever been in this seat or this process, please let that strength come through now. Like, allow for me to know that I've done this before, which, here now, I have not done this before. But I asked for that strength of any time that I may have done this before. if there was any timeline, any past life, any future life, like, let me now pull from that wisdom, that strength, that peace, that knowing that this is safe, that I am safe, that this is okay. Pulling from that strength really was big, very big. And so I'm breathing through it, visualizing it as I'm being wheeled, and it's very intimidating. But that's what I could do. Circle of influence, right? Like, I can't hop off the bed. My legs are numb. My stomach's becoming numb. But I can, and like, it's go time. You got to bring this kid into the world. And so that visualization really helped me out. And so at this point, we're in the room. They're prepping, trying to make sure that, giving them space to do everything they need to do. See one of my old coworkers in there from job I had way back in the day. So, in that moment, you're like, well, I could be like kind of nervous that you're about to see like me cut open and all vulnerable and whatnot. But you know what? This is your job now. You like help people deliver babies and be in rooms for surgery. So, okay, that's cool. And at this point, a lady asks me, she's like, would you like any music? Is there a artist that you want me to play? And I thought that was so cool. I was actually really grateful for that. And I was like, thought about it for a second. I was like, I want Patrick Watson. I would love to listen to Patrick Watson while I'm in here. And so she plays it on the radio of that. And it was kind of really nice because I've listened to that so much during the pregnancy. And like, it made it to my Spotify. He was my #1 artist on Spotify Wrapped for 2024 even. And so I was like, this just feels fitting. It's very calming yet like magical. It feels like music to listen to. And so I listened to it. And since it's on radio, it's rotating. Eventually my husband comes in once everything's prepped. And so that part kind of sucks that you have to do it without them. And once Danny is in there, I am both so grateful that he is there, but also very intimidated because that means I know what's happening next. And so I just start doing these deep breaths, and they tell you you're going to feel pressure. It's at that point that you do feel pressure. Like, I could feel so much that was going on. And as much as you don't feel the pain of it, what you do feel is still so interesting. And so I can feel once they're past all the layers. And so when I looked it up, it says 7 layers that they go through, which is meh. But as they went through those layers and as they start feeling around, you just feel it's like hands in your guts is the best way I can describe it. And so I'm just sitting there, I'm holding his hand, I'm breathing, and at a certain point, after all of those sensations, you do get that moment that you hear the cry. And I remember hearing little Jasper's cry for the first time because, you hear the doctor say, like, oh, he's out. And then you're waiting. You're like, okay, I'm ready for the cry. You hear the cry, and it's a wave of relief. It all feels worth it. As much as it's crazy what's going on, it feels worth it once you hear that cry. And they bring him around to my right. They show him to Danny. And then they tell Danny, like, okay, you ready to go? To go see him wait and everything. And Danny is like, gets up and he just follows along. And that's when I'm just suddenly like alone on the operating table again. And not really. I mean, you have all the staff around, all the doctors and team. But it is still, it's a moment. You heard your baby cry, you see him for a brief second, and then he's taken away. And now it's time for them to continue doing things with my body to make sure that I'm going to be okay and like seal me back up, give me some staples. And so for that part, I just remembered going back into a breathing state, back into visualizing that water just washing over me, back to running Reiki to the best I could. and being just focused on almost that deep, deep meditation. Because that's what really grounded me at this point. There's not a lot you can do when you got your arms strapped and you're like, you got this big blue sheet above you, and you know that you just cannot, like, not moving is what's going to help them the most. And so I really just leaned in on those meditations, those visualizations, and staying in that grounded space. And so once I finished that part, and it was interesting. I think I may have even fallen asleep because of how, like, just calm I had gotten, but I'm not sure if I really did or if it just felt like it. I just knew I was like focused on the breathing so much. And so at a certain point, we're done. They're wheeling me out, and it's once we get back to the room and I get to see him again. And it was just really nice because then suddenly it's like, there's Danny, and there's my mom, there's my baby. And that just all feels very special, very sweet. And there's a certain bliss to that. And we're figuring out new time parent stuff and, like getting set up and on his schedule in the hospital. But that's where we go through that night, and they let me know it's going to be about 3 a.m. when they're going to be able to, like, start unhooking me from certain things. I won't even say what it was, but they're unhooking me from things, which means I'm going to have to try to get up and go to the bathroom for the first time post C-section around 3 a.m. is what my brain told me. Because I had been in the hospital for a few days by this point, and I was ready for a shower. And so whenever I got up that very first time at 3 a.m. is when I tried, yeah, gosh, the first time you stand up after a C-section, like, I realized how painful it was. And so I, like, get to the point where I'm sitting. I feel proud of myself because they keep saying, like, the more you move after a C-section, the faster you're going to heal. And I'm like, okay, well, then no matter how bad it hurts, I better make sure I'm, like, still moving. And once I stood up is when I just started seeing spots everywhere. And so with seeing those spots everywhere, I was like, okay, I don't know what to do. And they're all like, okay, you need to sit back down. You need to take a break and you need to try again later. They're like, at least you got to the point of sitting. You did stand, but, like, can't be seeing spots. My check and my blood pressure's still high. And so whenever we tried again, it was probably at, I don't know, a little later in the morning. We waited a little bit. It's mid-morning. I finally use the restroom. I take a shower, and it's as I'm, like, patting down, and I remember patting the incision, and I start to see all the spots. Like, the hearing that time went. It almost sounded like when you're listening to something and the whole volume just turns down, and everything was distant. And so that's when I was like, oh, I'm about to pass out again. And so at that point, when they found out and they realized that my blood pressure still wasn't right, in addition to me having 2 near pass out spells, that we have the doctor show up, and she lets us know that she is no longer going to be on. It's Christmas morning at this point, and there's no other doctors that's going to be on for this day. And since I'm still having issues, they can't have me in there while having issues without a doctor that's going to be on call at all. And that's when they let me know that they're going to be transferring me over to Baptist in Little Rock. And that meant that I would be taking an ambulance ride over to Baptist in Little Rock without my husband or my baby. And it is an interesting feeling when it's like your first morning to wake up with your baby here. It's Christmas morning of all mornings. And you're being told, like, okay, they're outside the door now. And getting onto that gurney and being strapped into it was a lot because I was having to say bye to them, for a while, not forever, absolutely not forever. But still, like, you don't know. I have to wait for him to be discharged before they can even go to the house, gather things to come to Little Rock, and head to Little Rock. And so I'm getting wheeled away. This is when I see Danny tearing up, and we're all emotional. It was just been a long session by that point. Long hospital stay that's about to be longer. And whenever they wheel me, I did not realize how much it hurt to go over any kind of bump with that fresh incision. And so it's like 24 hours after I just had, a C-section done. And so every time they go over the little bumps on the doorways, I was like, ooh, I felt that, like, going into elevators or different things. I did not anticipate that that was just a hint of what would come while being in an ambulance for an hour drive, and every bridge, every bump while you're laying flat. Thank goodness they sent me with a pillow to at least press against my incision site. But, like, oh my gosh, every bump on that ride, I could just feel it, just felt it. And it was not comfortable. I do not wish that upon anybody. And so during that entire ride, I try to make some conversation with the EMTs. They weren't really feeling it. That's okay. It's Christmas. I'm sure they see crazy things on holidays or like during all of their shifts. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to be in my own mind for this. And I, cried a little bit because I was sad. I just got away from my baby and my husband. But that's when I started feeling the pain, and I was like, so what I can do again, go right back to Reiki, meditations, breathing through these bumpy bumps on this ride. And so I did. And eventually, after what felt like forever, after a lot of breathing, a lot of visualization, we make it to Little Rock. And I was so grateful once I got into the room because there was this nurse, and she was so nice. Her name's Jordan, and the moment that she came in, she just was like checking in with me. She's just like, "Girl, what's going on?" Like, she was a human, which I mean the EMTs were too, but they were very there was like a wall that was set up there, which is fine. That's their choice. I mean, I don't think it would probably be. I don't know. It's up to them if they want to get close to people. I'm not in an emergency state necessarily when they had me. Like, I had to get transferred. I was 24 hours post surgery, but like not like several people I'm sure they see that are, where they're having to make fast calls to save lives. So it's okay if they're not trying to like connect and make friends. But the moment I got over to the hospital, it was nice just being able to talk to someone that was a human, that felt soothing and comforting. And so we're sitting there talking. I'm explaining what's going on. She's empathizing. I'm so grateful just to have human connection. And luckily, it wasn't long after that that my brother and sister-in-law came in. And I was not expecting them to be there, especially that soon after I got there. But it turns out they were already visiting her family that was a lot closer to Little Rock. And so whenever they came in, I was able to just kind of be a bit more at ease. And this is where it's always so important to accept love from family, accept love from people that are trying to show up, that you feel that warmth from. Accepting the comfort, accepting the help. It's kind of like the last episode where it was like accepting help. And whenever they were in there, I was so grateful. We got to talk. I got to be on speakerphone with my mom and Danny as they were, waiting to be discharged and waiting to come home. And, I check in before they drove out to Little Rock. And eventually, they did make it. Kylie and Tristan sat with me the whole time. And by the way, speaking of Kylie and Tristan, they just had their little girl this morning. It's gonna make me emotional. So 2 weeks and a day after Jasper is born, we now have little baby Eden in the world. So these little cousins are gonna be 2 weeks and a day apart from each other. And I'm really excited for them to have each other like that and to both be in this world. She's doing good. Unfortunately, Kylie had some of the similar problems that I had with preeclampsia and high blood pressure. However, she luckily had an 11-hour labor, not 31, and she was able to deliver like without having to do a C-section or anything. So, I'm very glad, very grateful. I am so glad my niece is in the world, and I can't wait to go meet her. She's currently getting some oxygen because she is a bit early, but that's the blessing of these hospitals, right? And so back to where we were with the day of Christmas. My husband and my mom do eventually make it. I was so glad to see them. And it's at this point that we really just played the blood pressure game for the next few days. Every time we'd get near the end of a day, we'd think that we were about to be released, and then we'd find out like we had to stay another day. And I think that happened like 3 days. And that's after I'd already been in the hospital for a while. We ended up being in the hospital from Saturday night at 8 o'clock to being released like Saturday morning the next week. Saturday at lunch the next week. So it was a week of being in the hospital. But they did a blood transfusion. That was interesting. I've never had that done before. I had a vein blow. Never had that happen before. I still have the bruise from that. Who knew that that would be so gnarly? But I remember when that happened too. I was like, maybe it's supposed to hurt. I've never had a blood transfusion before. And I looked down and my arm was like a bubble. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And I pressed the nurse button and they were able to like come over and like take it out and put a new IV in. Gosh, I had that by that point. It was like I had so many IV locations, the amount of blood draws, the labs that they had to do. I was just a human pincushion for so long. But as we started to play that game, it was just pretty much just adjusting, getting used to hospital life, making the best of it that we could. My little brother got to come at one point. We played a game of Dungeon Mayhem. And a lot of it was just staying calm. I know at one point we had some family drama take place. I felt bad because I had to watch my mom kind of have a moment of just experiencing something that wasn't fair. And even in that moment, I had to remind myself, like, I had to stay calm because at that time, when I found out what was going on, I started getting very dizzy again. And I didn't think I'd get that affected by just information. But it was definitely a week of just going back into breathing, going back into circle of influence. What is it that I can control right now? Going back into visualizations and meditations. They helped me so much through that week. And then I remember once I got back, we were offered help from Danny's family, where they said, hey, would you like to come and stay the weekend with us? And that way we can just be kind of all hands on deck and help you with adjusting and healing with the C-section and the new baby and everything. And I was like, okay, like I should say yes. As much as I want to be home so dang bad after a week of hospital life, I also believe, like, I've been really big on this whole like accept help where it's being offered kick. And so I was like, yes, I should probably say yes. I should probably go ahead and accept some help. And it was there that Danny and I's aunt, she had mentioned, like, you're so calm. Like, I've never seen someone with a newborn be so calm. And just was asking about it. And that's when I realized, I was like, well, I don't think about it like that. I don't know. I'm like I'm in my version of survival mode right now. Just making it. But it's also a state that I try to stay in, and not like in an effort kind of way, but like I'm constantly doing tools and tactics and tricks. And man, that circle of influence is such a big one. Breathing is such a big one. Visualization, meditations, Reiki is such a big one. I can't imagine having gone through this labor and this process without Reiki. And there's so much bliss and blessings that come with having this new human. And I just allowed myself to stay in the love of that and in the blessing of that. And when I get emotional, I let myself cry. And when, there's no blocking things. That's a big part of energy work is do not block what's flowing. Just let it flow. Someone's waking up. But that was a big part of the lessons. Let things flow. Use your visualizations. Go places. Ask for assistance from other lives, from other dimensions, things that are for the highest and best good. Accept help. Breathe. That deep breathing as you're doing these visualizations and meditations. But I think that's a lot. That's a lot of what was the big part of this, especially going through this round of experience and this labor and these hospital stays, and even now as I'm getting into this newborn stage back here at home. This podcast episode alone, I had to pause it and wait 2 days to finish it because of just life happening, and I'm just having a lot of grace for myself, taking it easy, flowing with what's new, accepting help. And for you guys, I hope everything is going well. I hope that you are focusing on your circle of influence in this new year. Happy New Year. And, I'm here. If you are looking in for just one-on-ones, manifestation sessions, Reiki energy work, tarot readings, that is what I'm here for. We can talk things out. I love a good art of the paradigm shift where we go in and we just see what mindsets are present and what mindset can help you really move forward in a blossoming mode. So thanks for hanging out. Thanks for this wild adventure that I got to go on and listening to it. I know my energy is not the same as it is always. It is, I'm running on this much sleep. Just the smallest smidgen of it, I feel like lately. But it's a good world. It's a good new phase, a good new adventure. And enjoy repainting reality. I feel like I repainted reality pretty drastically in the past little bit. So I will see you guys later, and thank you so much for listening. Till the next time. Bye.